Hey guys, this is John. All right, it comes down to this. This is the finale of season 37 of the LoneWolf League on Lee Chess, 30 plus 30 chess. And first of all, I just want to say thanks to everyone who's followed me in my debut in this league. We've been playing every single week. Remember, this is one game per week for the past almost 3 months now? Hard to believe. It actually went by pretty quick. But I've been very happy with the overall organization of this league in many aspects, the competitiveness of my opponents, the feedback from you guys, the nice connections I've made with my opponents. I've just been very pleased all around. So huge thanks to all you guys for following my efforts in this league. And hopefully we'll get a good game here in the final game. And then at the end of this video, after we see my preparation, see the game itself, analyze the game, I'll do a little wrap up as well to talk about the final standings and maybe my plans going forward for the leagues. So let's get into where we stand going into round 11. So there are 3 players tied for first on 8 points out of 10. So we're looking at the total column here. It's the second column. So the 3 players are Antazi 8, my opponent from a couple rounds ago, myself, and then Pirate of the Frisians here. So each of us has 8 out of 10. Now, I mentioned this in the past few videos. This is a little confusing. There is M. de Verdier listed in the 3rd position here. Under the LJP plus TOT column, they have 8 points, but their real total is 7 points. And the TLDR, why that's the case, is M. de Verdier did not play the first game. So for pairing purposes, he gets a point for that game per Lee Chess League rules, but he doesn't actually get a point in the final standings. So more on M. de Verdier in a second, because this is relevant with him being in the mix here of the players at the top with 8 pairing points, but only 7 points in terms of the total. So you could say that Antazi 8, myself, and Pirate of the Frisians are the front runners going into the final round, but that's not the end of the story, and it would probably actually take more minutes than I hope to dedicate to this introduction video to try to forecast all the possible final round standing scenarios. But it's worth pointing out that there are players on 7.5 as well. So there's SidFan DX. Shout out to them, by the way. SidFan, I think, has been streaming a little bit and very active in the league, chatting and stuff. So seems like a cool guy. Shout out to SidFan. And then there's Road to Beating Fins. Yeah, the fan favorite, Road to Beating Fins, also on 7.5. So Road to Beating Fins lost to Antazi 8 in the previous round. I know many of you were hoping that there'd be maybe a direct clash between me and this player. Unfortunately, that was not to be. I'm a little disappointed myself, actually. But yeah, Antazi 8 did defeat Road to Beating Fins. Nevertheless, Road to Beating Fins still on 7.5 out of 8 with a chance. All these players on 7.5 do have a chance to win the league or tie for first. So Road to Beating Fins, also Foznaz, another previous opponent. Shout out to Foznaz on 7.5 as well. And then we have Bulgakov 1967. This player, kind of like M. de Verdier, has a different LJP plus TOT total than the actual total. So 7.5 compared to 7. And I think what happened with Bulgakov 1967 is like M. de Verdier, they did not play in the first game, but I believe because their rating is lower than M. de Verdier's, Lee Chess and the moderators assigned a half point for pairing purposes to M. de Verdier. I believe that's how it worked, but I could be wrong. So those are the players on 8, 7.5, and in the case of Bulgakov and M. de Verdier on 7 out of points. And then there are a number of other players on 7. So I think we can kind of assume that everyone from, 7 up here, with the exception of M. de Verdier, is competing for first place, right? Because there are just a number of things that could happen. Antazi 8 and myself could both lose. SidFan DX, Road to Beating Fins, they have chances against one another. I believe they're actually playing each other. I'll have to check that out. Foznaz with 7.5. Anyone with 7.5 who could get to 8.5 has a chance, because another thing, Pirate of the Frisians is taking another bye. So Pirate of the Frisians will finish on 8.5 out of 11. that's going to set the benchmark for first place in this league. So everyone's trying to get to 8.5 out of 11, or in the case of Antazi and myself, 9 out of 11. Okay, so who's playing who? Well, I'll tell you just for the top players, this 8-point group, because I didn't actually check all the other pairings. But Antazi 8 has the black pieces against M. Deverdier. Okay, so 1 plays 3. M. Deverdier playing with white. They just came off that draw with me, playing against Antazi 8. And I, surprisingly, have the white pieces again against Bulgakov 1967. Yeah, who's been having a very good league so far. Had that unplayed game and also took some buys, but is undefeated and has won every single game. So the 5 games that this player has played, they've won them all. So I have the white pieces against Bulgakov 1967. And objectively, I got to say, this is an excellent pairing for me. I don't think there's any dispute about that, just given how things have gone down. First of all, I get the double white in a critical game that I obviously hope to win. That always helps. And also, M. Deverdier, my very strong opponent, a FIDE master in real life, is playing my direct rival here, Antazi 8, the one player I'm most worried about, because Antazi has the same number of points as me. Remember, Power to the Frisians, for all intents and purposes, is sort of a neutral in this with that bye. So yeah, with M. Deverdier having the white pieces against Antazi 8, that should work out well for me just statistically. Anything can happen in one game, but M. Deverdier is going to be a pretty big favorite. And I will be a big favorite on paper against Bulgakov 1967. That being said, if you guys have been paying attention to this league, it seems like every week we got a competitive game, and every week it's a struggle. No one is an easy out in this, and especially not the players I'm showing here. And even if I were to scroll down a little bit, I've just been very, very impressed by the quality of competition in this Lone Wolf league. So yeah, that's a summary of the standings. 3 players on 8 out of 10. Sorry if I said 8 out of something else. I might have misspoke at some point. 7.5 out of 8. I don't know. I get confused like throwing these numbers and standings around, but we're through 10 games. There are 3 players on 8, one of which who is for sure going to get to 8.5, and a few other players who can get to 8.5 or perhaps 9 in the case of Antazi 8 and myself. Whew. Okay. You following all that? Great, because you won't have to think about it, at least for the next couple of hours, because we're going to get into my preparation next, and then the game itself, as usual. And after we get through that and the analysis, I'll do a little wrap-up at the end, talk about the final standings. I'm actually going to delay this video by a day so I can show you guys the final standings. And yeah, I'll just give a few thoughts, wrap-up thoughts about the league, and maybe what my plans are in the future when it comes to the Lone Wolf League. Okay, thanks again, everyone, for following my efforts this season. So great to see your comments every week. I know the long chess, the long format is really appreciated. It's really invigorated me, too. So let's put in as much of an effort as possible for this final game against the tough Bulgakov 1967, rated 2280, who has all wins so far in the league in the games that they played. So let's roll the tape, check out the preparation, and then the game. All right, see you guys. All right, so here's my opponent's profile. I have a little less time to prepare today's game, actually, even though this is the final round. I've been trying to treat this a little more casually. Not that I'm going to not take this game seriously. I'm going to give it my all, but I also don't want to overthink it. This is an unrated league, and sometimes I play better when in a critical game I just go with my first instinct. So we're going to prep for about 15 minutes. There are exactly 23 minutes before this game starts at the top of the hour for me. So I'll try to leave myself a little bit of a break before we begin. So let's zero in on Bulgakov's classical games. All right, so a mix of 45 plus 45 and also 30 plus O. Now, I have the white pieces, so let's just see what we can glean in general, but then we'll focus on what I might prepare with white. So this was a Sicilian Sveshnikov variation. Some theoretical stuff here. So what I'm doing now is just trying to get a very general sense of how this player plays. So theoretical stuff. Looks like black had a good position, was forcing white back. Now it looks like white is more or less stabilized. Now black probably has an edge in this double rook ending. And the game eventually ended in a draw? Yeah, okay. So white eventually held this one. So you don't really play the Sveshnikov unless you're comfortable with theory and often very long theoretical lines. So that's potentially a bit of a tell. I'm almost certainly not going to play e4, but good to know. This is a game Bulgakov played as white, 30+0. They played Catalan. Also some theoretical stuff. Good position for Bulgakov in this one. Yeah, excellent position. Went on to win. Okay. Another 30+0. That was another Sicilian against an 1800. I'll skip that one. This was another QGD. Actually, Catalan. It's like another good position for white. Although not the end of the story. Yeah, and white ended up winning this one as well. Okay. A lot of classical games, some sparring perhaps from various positions. Another 30+0, 25+0. I'm going to skip those. Yeah, it's clear Bulgakov plays d4 from the white side. Another d4. Yeah, okay. How about this one? Okay, so this was a game Bulgakov played as black against d4. They play knight f6. All right, so sort of a weird, almost French defense-like transposition here, but not a theoretical line. This one, black also got a good position. So d4, knight f6, and then on knight c3, they played d5. And this could go into a Jobava London if white played bishop f4. Not a move order I'll use, but let's say Bulgakov, if we found out that they play Grunfeld or King's Indian, I might play a Tory attack, which is knight f3 on move 2, followed by bishop g5. That's definitely something that's in my wheelhouse. So we'll continue to scroll here and see tons of games. I mean, when looking at this player's profile, overall, I didn't see that many games, but they played a lot recently. Okay. 15+15. Okay, so here is a mainline King's Indian from the looks of it. Well, not mainline, but black did go for a King's Indian setup. So that may be something Bulgakov does. I like playing against the King's Indian, I got to admit. It's actually probably one of my favorite openings to play against. So I'll be curious if that's common in this player's repertoire. Someone who plays Sveshnikov might also like King's Indian. I think those pairings do make sense. Okay. Yeah. Another King's Indian here. I'm probably getting pretty close to just clicking into their profile and narrowing things down. Maybe we'll do it with this game because there's a lot of noisy games that I have to sift through there that have all been played in the past week. So a very, very active player recently. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's click the little toggle. This is my opponent from last week, M. Deverdier, and then let's click Bulgakov as black. Okay, so I tend to take d4 as my base case because I play mostly d4 in serious games. I also play a lot of knight f3 and occasionally c4, and every once in a while e4, but probably ruling out e4, especially if this player is a Sicilian player. Not really inclined to get into a sharp Sicilian battle. So let's see, d4, knight f6, c4. Yeah, Bulgakov always plays g6, knight c3. Okay, and then it looks like they predominantly play Grunfeld, actually. I wasn't expecting that. So bishop g7, there's one game from a while ago, but primarily Grunfeld. Now, the Grunfeld is an absolute mess of variations and dynamic positions that can result, but also an absolute mess. I saw a game where this young Turkish grandmaster defeated the Grunfeld aficionado Peter Svidler. So I forgot his name. Adiz, I think. Super talented. He's like the youngest 2600 ever. I'll have to memorize his name because we're probably going to be hearing much more of him. But he employed a setup with an early H4, H5. So maybe that's something I could think about if I want to go for a pure Grunfeld against this player. I usually play Bishop C4 and go for a setup with Knight E2, which I see this player has played against, but it's been a while, and this was a bullet game from the looks of it. So I feel pretty comfortable with this, but I also don't believe it's going to lead to much of an advantage. I feel the same way about the Grunfeld as I do about the Nimzo Indian. I think this is one of Black's overall best defenses against D4. It's high degree of difficulty to play. I don't recommend people play Grunfeld, especially if they're below 1800 to 2000, probably minimum. It's a very complicated, nuanced opening, but it's very, very good. Better than the King's Indian, objectively, I think. Even though the King's Indian is much popular broadly. So, yeah, I could go for some sort of Grunfeld, but I don't know, especially for a game like this where I really want to win with the white pieces. It's a crucial final round game. I'd like to keep the tension. You know, I have a theory that players who play Knight F6 followed by G6 against D4, they don't like to put their pawn on D5 a lot of times, especially King's Indian players. Maybe a Grunfeld player wouldn't have as many qualms about doing that, but I have played, for instance, Knight C3 in this position, which offers to go into a Pierce with E4. So if Black completes the fianchetto, White can play E4 and play a Pierce. A lot of players who play King's Indian or Grunfeld may not be comfortable with that. Now, a Grunfeld player might just play D5 here, but then there's Bishop F4, which I think could lead to maybe some fun, interesting positions where I also get to keep the tension. So yeah, Bishop G7. And the computer is not going to say this is anything for White, but I have played this position before and actually successfully in tournaments. You can play Queen D2 or E3. Maybe we'll quickly click into the Masters database here and just get a sense for what happens. So yeah, let's say E3, castles, Bishop E2, C5. Yep. And then this move, Knight E5, is interesting. Posting up the knight. Knight C6, castles, C takes, E takes. Yeah, something like this, where maybe White can try to get a little something, like if B takes C6, probably Knight A4. Zeroing in on the queen and also the C5 square. Yeah, something along these lines. Bit of an edge for White. Probably nothing spectacular, but a position I wouldn't mind playing. That's for sure. Rook E1, and if E5, Bishop E3, or D takes E5. Yeah, I don't want to simplify the position too much, but if it takes my opponent a bunch of time to get here, and I'm more or less playing natural moves, I think that's ideal, especially for a final round game. So I could play something like this. This looks a little toothless, you might say, but it's in my comfort zone of keeping tension, playing something a little offbeat against the opponent, avoiding any sharp preparation that they might have in mind, and trying to drag out this game and play for a win. Really torture them. So I could also play more aggressively with Queen D2. So this is a definite possibility as well. If Knight E4, Knight takes, D takes, Knight E5 is popular. Okay. And I wouldn't think Black would go for this, but you never know. E3. Again, this doesn't look like much, but Queen C3 to stop C5 also prevents E5. White hasn't scored all that well from here, but this is another position I could play. I could try to milk something out of this. But I think more likely on Queen D2, yeah, we probably get castles. And then I could go for this Bishop H6 operation if I want. Yeah, this is a little bit sharper. Without exact prep, I think I'm a little less inclined to go for something like this. I have prepared this for over-the-board games in the past, but it's been probably 7 or 8 years. But let's just see how this goes. Knight E4, Knight takes, pawn takes, Bishop takes, Knight G5 hit the E pawn. And if F5, castles queenside. No advantage for White. Kind of a messy position. Looks on sight, I'd say, a little more natural to play with the white side. but that's just a pure off-the-cuff assessment. Yeah, so I could go for this. I'm curious also, does this player have anything against bishop g5? So have they faced bishop g5? They have. Okay, bishop g7. And I usually play knight bd2 in this position. They don't really have any games here. Nothing here. But I think I could anticipate d5 being played, and then maybe I go e3. And this is very similar to that last line, but there's a couple differences. White has played knight bd2 instead of knight c3, and the bishop is on g5 instead of f4. So, yeah, I could go for something like this. This is the Tory attack I was alluding to. Knight bd2. Let's just look at a few recent games, maybe where white has been successful with this. You can place the pawn on e3 or e4 in this situation. If black plays d5, which I think is likely in this game, of course you won't play e4. But if black sits back and plays d6, you might very well do that. So this is a game where Magnus beat Geary. Yeah, black has the two bishops, but white has a space advantage. I wouldn't mind something like this. That would be totally okay. What about d5 in this position? Let's look at a few thematic games with this. Mamedyarov-Grishuk. This seems a little more fluid compared to having the knight on c3 when black goes c5. So I think I'd feel a bit more comfortable with this. I feel there's decent chances to outplay my opponents. Yeah. I like the look of this. Okay. Duda versus Grishuk. It's a close call whether you put the bishop on e2 or d3. There's some advantages in both senses. e2 looks more passive, but if the position opens up, it's harder for black to target that piece. Also, it's harder for black to offer a bishop for bishop trade, too. Okay, so black got a big advantage out of this one, but white eventually won. Kramnik Ponomarev from 2007. Some trade of the light square bishops. Interesting, took with the knight here. Black ended up blundering a pawn. Possibly this was a fast game, like a blitz game or something. Yeah, Kramnik has been known to play some of these offbeat d4 setups, and with a lot of success, too. Rajaba versus Polgar. Yeah. Black was fine, but white ended up winning. Let's see a couple draws. Caruana playing against Grishuk. Looks like Grishuk has played this position before. Seems fond of it. That seems unlikely. That's like very specific preparation. Another Mamedyarov-Grishuk game. This is one where white took the pawn on c5 and then looked to support it with b4. Okay. All right, so I could keep going here, but I'm probably not going to glean anything super significant just given the sheer lack of games my opponent has in this line. And you play a setup like this for flexibility. You don't really play it to refute your opponent's opening right out of the gate. So there's about 8 minutes before we play. I want to wrap this up pretty soon. One last thing I want to check with this player is what they do against knight f3 or c4. Because I just remembered that Grunfeld players sometimes have difficulty against knight f3. So knight f3, knight f6, and then c4 specifically. Because if white refrains from putting the pawn on d4, it's not so easy for black to get a pure Grunfeld position. So if white plays knight c3 now, d5 would be the Grunfeld move. But after takes e4, we could go into positions that are a little bit different. If b takes c3, this is probably going to be like a mainline Grunfeld. But I have played this line with an early queen trade before. And black has to know what to do here in order to equalize, or at least get close. The move is f6, which a lot of people don't know. This is also in my wheelhouse, actually. And would be something a little unexpected, I believe, for my opponent. I have seen some recent games, actually, in this line with h4, this top computer move. I think I've seen some stuff with this, or maybe some analysis somewhere. Here's a Rajaba versus MVL game. Yeah. And what if bishop g4? You play king c2. Huh. Bishop e3. Knight d2, you start maneuvering. Yeah, I like these positions too. I know this might seem a little boring, but this is an option. I could go for this. Take like this. Play this queenless middle game. Because if black plays a pedestrian move here, say they play bishop g7, it's pretty well known that white gets a nice advantage. Bishop f4, hit the pawn. Yeah, c6, king c2. Let's just refresh my memory on this. Knight d2. And it looks like a small advantage, but it can easily snowball into a larger advantage. Let's say castles here. A4, start expanding on the queen side. There's also f3. Yeah, what if knight b6? You go a4, right? You try to grab space. Not easy for black to simplify here. Bishop e6, a5. And if a5 by black, you can play the bishop back to e3 for one thing. There's also bishop c7, knight d7, knight c4. And black already has problems with the a-pawn. Interesting. You know what? I'm tempted to do this. This would be a little more targeted, seeing if my opponent is aware of what to do in this position, because it's pretty forcing up until this point. So bishop g7, I just do remember, f6, which the idea is to meet bishop f4 with e5. That's why f6 is allegedly the best move here. I do remember some analysis I saw recently with h4. It could be the Greek player and author Nikos Dirlis. I think he has actually wrote a Twitter thread or something about this, or maybe even published something about this. So let's say black goes bishop g7. You just keep running the pawn. And if g5, play knight d4. Yeah, this looks ugly already for black. And this would be surprising, I think. I don't think many people would be anticipating this. And this is how the Rajaba versus MVL game went. Nice. Okay. Yeah. You know what? I might give this a shot. This is, I think, almost exactly what I would like to do, the type of position I'd like to achieve. A little bit of a surprise. I have played this before, so they might see some games in the database where I've done this. But h4 would certainly be a surprise. And I think otherwise I'm likely to get a good position. Likely to get a good position. So one last thing, because the game is in a few minutes. Any other deviations? I mean, they could play bishop g7, then we're going into a mainline King's Indian. I'm okay with that. It doesn't look like they have a ton of experience with this. Let's just say this basic position. Have they ever had this? No. Okay. They have played c5 here sometimes. Not in the past year, though, it looks like. Yeah, so I think we're likely to get this. What about this c5 game? Again, it's been a little while. This would be similar to my game against M. de Verdier from last week. Yeah, I think I'm going to do this. Knight c3 and go from there. Likely black will play d5, and then I can get an opportunity to play this queenless middle game. All right, so I changed it up. I was originally thinking Tori or something with like that knight c3, bishop f4, but I think I'm going to go for this, and we'll try to push for the win, even if the queens come off the board. Okay, so let's check out what happens in the game next. All right, and we're off. Let's tell my opponent good luck. Have fun. This is the final round, Game 11 of the Lone Wolf League on Lichess, Season 37. Let's open with Knight F3. As planned, I pulled a bit of an audible in terms of my preparation in the last 10 minutes, but I'm feeling pretty good. I just hope to get some sort of free-flowing game. I'm not too concerned about getting a large advantage out of the opening. Okay, so Knight F6. Let's play C4. So I thought I was going to be the master in this game, but maybe I'll end up being the margarita. You never know. So, yeah, good luck to Bulgakov. All right, and G6. So this maybe isn't an unexpected move order. Knight C3. Let's see if my opponent goes for D5 or bishop G7. This is a bit of moment of truth. And they actually go bishop G7. Okay, so they're inviting E4, and they're inviting a mainline King's Indian. So, all right. I could play e4 as planned. I could play d4, although that allows black a chance to play d5 again if they want. So this suggests that they've prepared the King's Indian defense, because bishop g7 was played right away. Now, within the King's Indian defense, I have played a fair amount of exchange King's Indian, but I don't think that will be the greatest choice. Maybe we'll see when we get to one of the mainline positions in question. But I might just want to play something a little more mainstream within that. I'm just thinking for a moment here, because I do have some options. d4, e4, g3. Within g3, I don't have anything specific prepared. d4 also, like, very likely I'm going to play e4 anyways if black persists in allowing it. So let's go e4. I'm expecting d6. Maybe black will castle as well, because e5 really isn't a concern. But no, e5. Okay, so yeah, black prepared something pretty specific here, because there's a line, knight takes e5, knight takes e4. Bishop, knight takes e4, bishop takes e5, and then d4. And I don't recall anything about this line. Very, very little. So that's an interesting choice. Interesting choice of move order by black. I could play d4 myself here if I want. That's a possibility. But knight takes e5 is the critical thing to do. It's just, yeah, knight takes e5, knight takes e4. There's a fair amount of theory, and I have not looked at that in a while. I have not brushed up on that in quite a bit. So d4 might be a good anti-theory move in this position if I don't want to take on e5. It's not the most glamorous move, I will fully admit that, but I think it could give me, hopefully, a free-flowing game, something I can just play on sight, more or less. Let's say d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, castles, bishop e2, and if rook e8, play f3, knight c6, knight back to c2, just try to squeeze black. That would be fine. That's within my comfort zone. But yeah, knight takes e5, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, d4. I just don't remember much about that. Oh, and I think also on knight takes e5, there's also just castles for black, where also I don't have a ton of knowledge. So I don't think I'm going to calculate and convince myself to play knight takes e5 here. So let's go ahead and play d4. We'll just open the center. There's always these meta games in the opening, right? Trying to enforce your will preparation-wise or even stylistically on your opponent. So we're getting a Maroczy type structure. I wonder if knight takes e4 was a move there, actually. Knight takes queen e7. Maybe we'll look at that after the game, but... Okay, so here I was thinking bishop e2, just a standard move. Get ready to castle, getting ready to meet rook e8 with f3. There are some instances where black can try for a quick d5 to explode the center. So I should be aware of that. But for the moment, I don't think that's a concern. So bishop e2, rook e8, f3. Is it possible black could play d5 there? I mean, maybe, but I could probably play e takes d5 if I want. Not so convinced that that's good for black, nor should I probably spend too much time on it. So likely I'm going to play bishop e2 and just meet rook e8 with f3. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, rook e8, standard. And f3 to support the pawn. Bishop g5 also comes to mind, but after h6, I'd have to be willing to give up the dark square bishop or allow my dark square bishop to be chased. I don't like the look of that, so probably f3. And this slightly weakens the diagonal towards my king, but I don't think knight h5 should achieve much. much. It looks premature. I could even play bishop e3 to meet queen h4 with bishop f2. That should be fine. So let's go f3. And the general setup for white is bishop e3, queen d2, castle short, rook's coming to c1, d1, sitting on that space advantage. This can happen out of the mainline King's Indian too, by the way, this type of situation. I think Daniel Naroditsky often plays this line in the King's Indian with e takes d4. He seems to like these positions. Okay, so my opponent came armed with a pretty specific preparation, a bit of preparation here, and goes c6. So yeah, this is a principled move, trying to explode the center. This could get sharp. This could potentially get sharp, because I believe something like knight b3 or knight c2 would be critical here, but that does allow black to perhaps play d5 and open the center. So if I castle d5, black's going to try to liquidate the center. And like I said, that could get into some sharp, rather specific types of positions. But I don't like the speed with which black is playing. Like they came prepared in this one for sure. So I'm going to have to tread carefully without using a ton of time. So knight b3 would be my instinct here. I think if this were a bullet game, that's probably what I would do. And then on d5, c takes d5, c takes d5, e takes d5. Oh, I can't draw arrows. Knight b3, d5, c takes d5, c takes d5, e takes d5, and then try to quickly castle if possible. But black's probably going to try to disrupt that. You know, they can play queen b6, for instance. So let's think about my alternatives. Knight c2 is another way to try to discourage that move. I seem to remember there's some ideas. So let's say I castle and black goes d5. I think there's also e takes d5, c takes d5, c5, where you actually bypass the d pawn and you just try to establish a pawn on c5. So I could go for something like that. Not the most inspiring move, but if I want to dodge something with knight b3, d5, which black might still know, might still be preparation. And from experience, I think black does get some decent compensation for the pawn. That might not be a bad option. So castles, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, c5. And just say, hey, I'm going to put my pawn in the middle. And I want to prevent you from opening the position too much, really. Yeah, so I'm inclined to go that direction versus try to play principally here and refute this whole d5 thing, because that's gotten me into some trouble in the past in like faster games online. And given the whole tenor of the type of game that I'm hoping to play in this one, that's not really what I want. So castles, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, c5. I'm just looking out for any way black can straight up win that c pawn. I'm not really seeing one. I think that would be okay. I mean, they could play b6, but then maybe I could even play c6 in response to that. Could also just take the pawn. Doesn't look like much for black. So castles, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, c5. I think knight c6 would be the expected reaction. And then maybe I can play something like king h1. Just hide my king. Although then knight takes d4, queen takes d4, knight e4, potentially forcing queen takes d5. I don't know. So castles, d5, e takes, c takes, c5, knight c6. Maybe I maneuver the other knight to b5, because the advantage of going c5 is you get this potential outpost to work with. There's also knight d to b5, maybe even better. Knight d to b5. Yeah, let's go ahead and castle. I think I pretty conclusively ruled out this stuff, so I'm just going to play this way. And I expect black to go for d5. There's no reason not to. They've got that pawn supported multiple times. Queen b6 is maybe a move that comes to mind, trying for some knight takes e4 sneakiness, but I think I can go knight a4 against that. So black plays d5. My recording and levels look good. Always checking that at various times in the game just to make sure. Okay, so e takes d5, c takes d5, c5. Black has a bunch of moves there, so I don't even know if it's productive to try to predict how they're going to respond to that. Yeah, I think that's a bit futile to attempt to predict that. You know, I could also take and then just play some sort of developing move, or even king h1. Looks kind of lame, though, I admit. But e takes d5, c takes d5, let's say king h1, I am going to be better developed when all is said and done. D takes c4, bishop takes c4. It's really not much, though. I think even if black plays knight c6 there, they should be, I think, more or less okay. But king h1 could be a very handy move just to step out of any issues with my king on this g1, a7 diagonal. But I'm going to have to make up my mind pretty soon here because I'm burning a bunch of time. So e takes d5, c takes d5, c5. And on knight c6, what am I doing? Am I playing knight db5? Maybe. I could also take the knight. It's a possibility. Well, okay. I'm going to go for this. I think more hemming and hawing is not going to help. I wonder if it's possible for black to take with the knight, by the way. With the idea of c takes d5, queen b6. Looks weird, but that knight on d4 is pinned. So on knight takes d5, maybe I want to go knight takes d5, actually. But no, black takes with the pawn. That's standard. The expected reaction, at least. Yeah, and I think c5. Let's do it. This might be theory. I'm sure there's been games played from here. There might be some substantial theory from this position. I know it's an idea, this bypassing with the c-pawn, but I am on my own. So preparation-wise, I'm disappointed because I did not at all predict this line would be played. I don't think there was any evidence my opponent was going to do that. So that happens sometimes with your preparation. It's just a cost to doing business. I think the position itself, though, is fine. You know, I don't sense any great danger here. I think it's just a question of how much of an advantage am I going to have to work with? And is Bulgakov going to slow down and maybe indicate that they're out of preparation as well? So black has the isolated d-pawn. That's what I'd like to play against in the long run. But black has some typical compensation in the form of activity. This bishop on g7 is always lurking in this type of position. So I have to take great care if ever black tries to unleash stuff towards my knight on d4. I think knight c6 would be the most straightforward move here for black. And that's going to challenge me to either take the knight or maybe do something with the b5 square. I'm thinking like one of the knights to b5. Maybe knight d to b5 would be best in that instance. Although I don't know, knight c6, or sorry, knight c to b5, I mean. So knight c6, knight c to b5. Then let's say knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen e7. It's a bit awkward for me because it hits this pawn and my bishop is loose on e2. So I don't know. Maybe on knight c6, I even want to play knight b3. Just relinquish the d4 outpost for now, but try to hold this pawn on c5. And if d4, maybe knight b5 then, which could create some issues on some squares for black. So I would say on the whole, I'm trying to play strategically here with this selection of e takes d5, c5, but I'm sure this probably isn't the most principled thing to do. But you got to make compromises, especially when it gets into this meta aspect of knowing your opponent has prepared some line or they seem very confident playing something sharp very quickly that was unexpected. You do have to gauge how comfortable you are continuing to proceed down these sharp lines without prep, which is increasingly dangerous the higher you go in chess. Yeah, so knight c6. So knight b3 is a move I was sort of coming around to. Definitely not the only move, though. I mean, maybe bishop b5 even, now that I look at it. That seems intriguing as well. Somehow I feel like the c5 pawn, though, is going to be a target in a lot of these positions. So knight b3 might fit the bill in terms of making sure that the pawn on c5 is just always pretty well guarded. Because I can always send the other knight to b5 if I get a chance. So knight b3, d4, knight b5. I don't see anything compelling about that position for black. Would doubt they want to do that. So knight b3. Seems like a good move, too. There's even stuff like if black plays a5 trying to chase my knight, I might stick the other knight on a4 to blockade and perhaps introduce knight b6 as an option. Sort of playing on the flanks. So this is my top candidate move at the moment. Seems to strike the right balance. It's almost an admission that knight c6 is a good move for black, but it just feels shaky to allow. If I allow knight takes d4, then there's knight e4 with the discovery on my queen. The bishop on e2 is loose. I don't think I can trust that. And importantly, I can never play bishop e3 in these positions, right? Because black's rook controls that square. So unless I'm going to go sharp with knight b5, I think this is my best option. And what did I not like about knight b5? Even something like bishop f8 kind of concerns me there. Just threatening this pawn and guarding d6. Yeah, let's go knight b3. I think this move makes a lot of sense, even though it is a retreat from a traditionally good outpost square. Okay, well, we more or less have a board full of pieces. There's been a couple pawn exchanges, but that's it. So I think we're going to get our tension-filled game. The question is, who does the tension favor? I did get a basic read on my opponent that they seem to thrive in unbalanced positions. And again, just based on their opening repertoire, Sveshnikov, Sicilian, Grunfeld, apparently King's Indian. They don't mind, mixing it up. And I sometimes am okay with mixing it up, but mostly I like to retain control, especially with the white pieces. So we got a clash of styles here. I almost forgot drink check, guys. So I'm drinking some decaf espresso with a little bit of cream. And then I've got my lemon and ginger tea. sans teabag. I already took the teabag out. This was heated up in the microwave again. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't get an electric kettle. I think I have one, but it's in storage. But maybe next season of the Lone Wolf League, whenever I enter it, I'll have an electric kettle for you guys ready to go. And then we've got our water as well. So my beverage preparation, at least, has been very consistent in this league. Okay, and black plays h6. I'm a little surprised by that because I wasn't really thinking about playing bishop g5. So I'm kind of pleased to see that. Not that it's a bad move, but it indicates that the position's probably going to slow down a little bit. I guess black's worried about bishop g5 taking on f6 and the d5 pawn being loose. But that seems a bit existential to me. So, I mean, knight b5, if I want to start trying to clamp onto the d6 square and maybe c7, that looks pretty nice. Bishop f4 also comes to mind, although knight h5 might be a good reply. Leaves the pawn hanging, but yeah, I think if the position opens up, black's going to be relatively happy. So knight b5, asking what black plans to do about this d6 square. That looks interesting. There's also maybe king h1 if I want to respond to some semi-waiting move, semi-useful move with a useful move of my own. I don't know, maybe I can get by without king h1 now, though, if I've managed to slow down black's claim to the long diagonal. So knight b5, what's black going to do? I mean, b6 is always an option, but it invites this knight d6 move with a fork. And then at minimum, I feel like I can go after the bishop pair. Rook e6, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, bishop a6, let's say. That feels like it should be a little something for me. Tiny edge, maybe. Black will still retain activity, but yeah, knight b5. What else? King h1, rook e1 maybe. Not too many other moves I'm thinking about, though. The advantage, too, of knight b5 is that if for some reason I don't want to play knight d6 after that, I can always pivot back to d4 and get both knights sort of zoned in on d4. Although if I had done that, maybe it's arguable I should have played knight c to b5 right away. But I do feel more comfortable executing this maneuver now that the pawn on c5 is guarded. That's, I think, a big difference in how this is going down. So knight b5 to menace knight d6. I don't see anything obvious black's going to do against that. I mean, maybe bishop e6, but then I can even think about the bishop f4 move again. Knight d6, of course. Yeah, I don't see too many other strong candidates, so knight b5, I mean, queen e7. Queen e7 hits the bishop, but I feel like I can just play bishop d3 or something against that. Knight e5, knight d6. Feels like it should be a bit better. Tiny bit, nothing crazy. But I should be aware moving the knight does weaken the bishop. That's a theme for sure. Okay, let's play knight b5. If I'm going to make use of the pawn on c5, it's probably going to have to be with this move. Could play the bishop to f4 at some point to try to use this square, but I'd much prefer a knight land here than my dark square bishop. Oh, and black could play their dark square bishop to f8 to guard d6, but I sort of figured that bishop f4 in some capacity. Okay, maybe I have to calculate bishop takes c5 there, but bishop f4 or maybe even knight d6 voluntarily could make sense. Because let's say bishop f8, and let's just say I go knight d6 right away. Bishop takes d6, pawn takes d6. If black plays queen takes d6, there is bishop takes h6. So that's a potential sort of base case. But I think more likely on bishop f8 specifically, bishop f4 is probably the principled reply. Yeah, which makes more sense, I think, now that black's bishop isn't on g7. Just wonder if bishop f8, bishop f4, bishop takes c5 is at all possible. With the idea knight takes c5, queen b6. But now I think rook c1 should be okay then. Guarding the knight on c5, because the bishop on e2 supports the other knight. If black was doing this where both knights were under attack at the end, it might be different. But here I think the knight on b5 should be well supported. Thanks to everyone watching this, both on the archive version that I'm going to be posting a day or two after this game is being played. We're playing this on a Saturday afternoon. I think we're in the same time zone. So yeah, it started at 2 o'clock p.m. U.S. Central Time. I might post this on a Monday when the final standings for the league are out, just so I can show that in the video. Otherwise, you'll be watching this at the earliest on a Sunday, the day after the game. So this is the first moment in the game where I feel like I'm actually creating some potential issues for black. I think up until this point, I've been reacting to what black is doing and try to play principally, but also managing my risk at the same time, because black did straight up surprise me with this opening and their choice of lines. So I hope Bulgakov continues to think ideally under 20 minutes so I can reduce this time gap. I know I've been struggling with time throughout the season. Not going to lie that it's a big problem for me as a chess player, but it must be said that explaining the games real time is a detriment to my performance. And it's a trade-off I'm, of course, willing to make. But for those who are curious, I do think doing what I'm doing, commentating these games, probably detracts maybe 50 to 200 rating points from my performance, depending upon the type of game, the type of opponent, type of time control even. I think in these longer games, 30 plus 30, it's a negative impact for sure, but I think it's manageable. It's probably in the 50 to 100 rating point range. So if my rating is currently 2480, I mean, I think I play these games more like a 2430, maybe below 2400, but not much below. Like I can still play a very strong game of chess. And I'm certainly not going to use this as an excuse, nor have I ever used it as an excuse for any poor performance. But we should recognize that fact that it's talking for 2.5 hours straight, which is usually how long these games last, it's not easy. It's really not easy. That said, if you guys want to try your own dual commentary or just commentary yourselves in the league, one of my opponents did do that a few rounds ago. So the player When Rooks Fly, shout out to him. And I actually wonder if he's kept that up for some of the other rounds, because I think I saw he was doing it for at least one other game as well. Video annotating your own games is also a good way to understand your own thought process, though. So I've recommended it to students before. It's especially good if you have the habit of just playing way too quickly, because forcing yourself to explain your moves before you play it is naturally going to slow you down. Trust me. So it's a strategy you can consider. Yeah, I really feel like this h6 move was not quite in the spirit of the position. I don't think it's a question mark move, but I really wasn't planning on going bishop g5 and then trading the bishop for the knight. If black was worried about the d-pawn, there are many cases where black could just allow that operation to happen, take with the bishop. And if I were to take on d5, I'm just allowing something like bishop takes b2 in the end. And I'm trying to fight black on the dark squares. A trade of my dark square bishop for a black knight really isn't a desirable trade. So we'll see what the engine has to say about that move afterwards, but this has maybe given me a bit of something to latch onto here. I think a6 on the previous move might have been a better rook pawn move if black were going to make one, just to stop this whole knight b5 thing. It does weaken the b6 square, so there's a bit of a trade-off, but it does stop it. Okay, and black goes b6. Yeah, so this is one move I think I mentioned, and I thought knight d6 here would give me a little something. There's also bishop f4. Okay, so if I want to play something a little more aggressive, bishop f4 to threaten knight c7. But the thing about bishop f4 is black might play knight h5 to go after the bishop. And then bishop c7, queen e7, maybe somehow looks a little shaky to me. You got pieces all jumbled up there. Maybe I could play rook e1 in that position. Is that possible? Guard the bishop, because black would be hitting that. So I think I have a clear choice here. Knight d6 or bishop f4. I'm not sure too many other moves make sense. I'm not going to take the pawn. Taking the pawn and allowing black to take with check doesn't make any sense. So probably knight d6 is my base case. And then let's say, where should black put the rook? Let's say rook e7. Knight takes c8, bishop takes c8. I was thinking bishop a6 at that point. And aren't my bishops actually causing black some trouble there? Because the other bishop could then make an appearance on f4. Yeah, hold up. Is black running into issues if that happens? They can take it with the queen on c8. That's possible. But I wonder if I can actually create some trouble there. Knight d6, rook e7, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, bishop a6. Because wherever those rooks go, or that singular rook goes, c7, b8, or a8, they might be running into problems. So I think I'm going to go for that. I could think about bishop f4 more. The idea b takes c6, knight c7. But even that line, I'm not so sure about knight h5. Yeah, knight h5. So let's go knight d6. And I don't want to spend too much more time on it. Rook e6 right away. Okay. So take on c8 and then bishop a6 is what I was thinking. Take, bishop a6, rook c7. I feel like at minimum then I can take on b6. Give black some messed up pawns. Black's next move is going to be b takes c5 if my knight lingers. So it stands to reason taking and front running that makes sense. So let's do it. We'll see which way black takes. Black might take with the queen. They might just deem it safer to do that. But no, they take with the rook. And this really seems to invite bishop a6. Because I think bishop a6, I guess black could play rook b8 if they want. Or sorry, rook a8. But it looks weird. I wouldn't think black would want to do that. Bishop a6, and if rook a8, I mean king h1 even. So that on b takes c5, knight takes c5 comes with an attack on the rook, and I don't get pinned by queen b6. I should be somewhat better there. Black might still have some activity to work with, but I think I should definitely be better. So bishop a6, f4 sometimes comes to mind. It looks a little premature, though. So I think bishop a6, rook c7 is likely, and then bishop f4 with tempo. And then what? Rook c to e7, bishop d6, rook e to e8, rook back to e8, and then bishop b5. What's going on? Feels like I retained pressure. Yeah, let's go bishop a6. And I want to keep the pressure up. And keep the time reasonable. So now I'm trying to stretch black's defenses and hopefully get both my bishops into the game with tempo. Bishop f4 next if I can. Yeah, tough call for black. I think it's between rook c7 and rook a8. Rook a8 looks weird. Generally, you wouldn't want to allow rook a8 when white can play bishop b7. But then black will play rook to b8. And if I take on c6, that's probably not much. Probably just fizzles. Maybe I'm even worse there. So I probably want to keep my bishop on rook a8. Might throw in the king h1 move. Might do that. There is knight b4, I suppose, I have to watch out for. Maybe rook a8, I'll go... Now, king h1 probably makes the most sense. Plays rook c7. Okay, I'm actually happy to see that move. I think rook a8 might have been better, because this allows me to bring this bishop out with tempo. Or take on b6. Taking on b6 doesn't look half bad either. Just to compromise black's structure. And then black has two isolated pawns, and I have the bishop pair. In the abstract, I think I'd be pretty happy about that, although admittedly black does have good development. So bishop f8 feels more principled, though. So I think that's the primary move I gotta consider. Or sorry, bishop f4. Bishop f4, knight e5, though. How do I feel about that? That allows knight d4, maybe. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. So bishop f4, rook d7. But then maybe I'm just chilling. I play rook c1. Okay, there's knight h5 still, I suppose. Bishop f4, rook d7. Maybe g4? Pawn g4? Or bishop f4, rook d7, bishop b5. This knight h5 move, though, is annoying, admittedly. Do I keep this simple? C takes b6, A takes b6, then bishop f4? I guess there's rook a7 in that case. Opens that up. Don't know. Bishop f4, though, feels right. So I think I might make that move. Continue chasing my opponent's rooks. Bishop f4, rook d7, and then I feel like at minimum I can play something like queen d2, maybe. Keep the tension on c5. That also hits h6 twice, actually. So that could be handy. I've got e2 covered. Yeah, queen d2 is nice because it covers b4 as well. No knight b4. Okay, let's do it. My opponent continues to play very, very fast, so I need to try to keep pace as best I can. Rook d6. Yeah, but what are you doing against bishop d6? Bishop d6, rook e8. Bishop b5. I sort of assume that would be awkward for black. I don't know if it's the end of the world, but queen to c8 then? Nah, I must have pressure there. I don't really buy what my opponent's doing with this whole rook maneuver. But this is not the first time I've said that in the league. I said that a bunch last game against M. de Verdier, and it was largely fine for them, so don't read into that too much. But bishop d6, I mean, if they sack the exchange, I'm definitely okay with that. Black will have some activity, but probably not enough. Bishop d6, rook e8, bishop b5. Queen d7 runs into knight d4, so I would have to assume queen c8, but then rook c1 at minimum, just line up with the queen and the knight. There's no rook e1 thing to worry about. Okay, I call. Show me your hand. A little early for that, but okay. Rook e8. What a maneuver for that rook. Rook c8, rook c7, rook e7, rook e8. It looks like black just doubled kind of casually, but the rook took an interesting route there. Okay, so bishop e5 at this point. is the consistent thing to do. Is black really just going to play queen c8 there and say, hey, I don't really believe what you're doing? But doesn't that loses material? Bishop b5, queen c8, I can take on c6 and knight d4. This is getting dire for black, is it not? And if bishop b5, b takes c5, I take on c6, black can take on d6, I take on e8. Again, and up an exchange. Okay, show me. Is black just missing that if they defend the knight, I can take on c6 at minimum, and knight d4, most straightforward thing? We're up to 50 spectators in this game now, by the way, watching live. We're what, 41 minutes into this game? Still pretty early. If black starts thinking a lot here, that's a bad sign for them. Because I think it'll be a case of thinking, going into the tank after the damage has been done. Trying to close the door after the horse is bolted. Putting the toothpaste back in the tube doesn't generally work too well in chess. Or in life. So now I'm very optimistic now because this last sequence of moves looks very reckless for black. I just don't think they considered how risky this is. And I think they're going to have to sack an exchange in some capacity. I don't see any move that prevents me from winning an exchange. Even if they go queen a8, right? Any way they defend the knight with the queen, at minimum, bishop takes c6, knight d4. Fork on the queen and the rook with tempo and all that. And I don't even lose a pawn in that entire transaction. And I can take on e6 and maybe play rook e1 at the end. I might already have a decisive advantage. B takes c5 might be the best way to attempt to play this position. I think that's actually probably the case. Bishop takes c6 and then let's say queen takes d6. Bishop takes e8. Rook takes e8. But there too, I'm up a pure exchange. Black will have some compensation there, but I'm up a pure exchange. That might be what black determines they have to do, actually. B takes c6 or c5. Bishop takes c6, queen takes d6, bishop takes e8, rook takes e8. Let's say rook e1 then, maybe rook b8. Rook b1, so I can meet c4 with knight d4 perhaps. I'll have to be careful on the dark squares. That's still not an automatic win by any means, but should be good. Yeah, I think this is black's best try. And I believe they're going to find it too. I'm almost inclined to try to take with the bishop and keep control. But I think taking the material must be best. Must be the way to play. Oh, black does actually win a pawn in that transaction, so they'll only be down 1 point of material. Yeah. B takes c5, bishop takes c6, queen takes d6. Rook takes e8, rook takes e8. That's only 1 point of material. Maybe I start with queen d2 at that point. That might be a good way to play. Just get the queen off the back rank, guard the b2 pawn. I'll have to be careful, though, because black might play c4, knight d4, knight d7, and start trying to maneuver. So black could have some decent compensation now that I look at that position a little deeper. This doesn't exactly feel like the type of line you want to stumble into, though, as black. So overall, I'm still very happy with this. But this won't be easy, even if I win the exchange in that way. So I should spend all my time now just thinking about what happens on b takes c5. I'm 90% sure black's going to play that move. So b takes c5. I mean, is there any universe where I take with the bishop? It's possible. Keeps the pressure on. But it's not exactly principled. Feels like I'm hedging my bets quite a bit with that move in a game that I want to win. But it's definitely uncomfortable for black to get out of those knight pin situations. But let's say b takes c5, bishop takes c5, knight d7 maybe. Attack the bishop, open up an attack on b2. Nah, I don't know. I don't like that so much. So b takes c5, bishop takes c6, queen takes c6, queen takes d6, bishop takes e8, rook takes e8. If my knight wasn't on b3, I think I'd have a much bigger advantage there. But the knight is awkward on b3. No doubt. So queen d2, I think, was my base case there in that resulting position. But c4 is annoying. c4, knight d4, knight d7. I feel like I have to play king h1 and then knight c5, knight d3. I don't know. I don't really like that so much. So b takes c5. I could take with the bishop, just somehow feels a little limp. Like, I wouldn't be punishing black for their perceived transgressions over these last few moves with their rook. B takes c5, bishop takes c6, queen takes d6, bishop takes e8, rook takes e8. Kind of think I need king h1. So king h1, c4, let's say, knight d4, what could be more natural? But this knight d7 move I keep looking at, it's annoying. Knight d7. Maybe knight b5 then? And try to quickly bring the knight to c3. That might be a decent attempt. Yeah, I think it's clear if I go down that path, I'm going to need king h1 somewhere. My king is too exposed on this diagonal otherwise. So black really thinking here, but again, I'm pretty sure they're going to play b takes c5 if they're assessing now what's going on, which, given the time, I think they're doing right now. There's no other move that really makes any sense. They can sack the exchange this way, but they run right into a pin, and they're the ones with the isolated pawn. They'd much rather have the D and the D and the C pawns connected. So b takes c5, bishop takes c6, queen takes d6, bishop takes e8, rook takes e8. I think I'd start with king h1 at that point. I think that makes sense. King h1, and then if c4, knight d4, knight d7, knight b5. Hits the queen with tempo. And then very quickly try to pivot that knight. That's what I'm thinking. Knight c3. Another case where the knight doesn't really want to be on d4 long term. And this is a reason not to play rook e1 after I win the exchange, because rook e1 encourages black to play rook b8 and avoid a rook trade. You can see when you're calculating, you do a lot of going through the same line again and again. It helps cement the position in your head, helps avoid blunders, but mostly you have to do it because you got to keep things straight in your head. So b takes c5, bishop takes c6, queen takes d6, bishop takes e8, rook takes e8, king h1, playing the necessary move first. Black could play c4 or knight d7 there, or even rook b8. c4 would be the most principled. I would think c4. Although it does invite knight d4. So maybe even knight d7, but then queen d2. Queen d2, rook b8. Do I quickly try to play a rook to d1 then and go after... Rook d1, try to go after d5, but I'm still inviting c4. But then knight d4, knight c5. I want to avoid a situation where black's pawns gets to c4. Yeah, and black does this. Black's pawn gets to c4. And I have my knight on d4, but they have knight d7, c5 coming in. So, all right. So bishop takes c6. Queen takes d6. Bishop takes e8. Rook takes e8. King h1. I'm probably just going to go for that now because I really don't believe I should play bishop takes c5. I think knight d7 is a good counter to that. My bishop is under attack, so let's go for this. Expecting queen takes d6. Take the exchange. And now king h1 is what I was thinking. King h1. I just feel like that move is almost mandatory in almost all these positions. So it feels correct to prioritize it. It's also going to throw the ball back at black and make them come up with something good. So, yeah, let's play king h1. So, yeah, black is only down 1 point of material, but a welcome series of events for me over these past few moves, especially given the opening, where it seemed like black was playing very confidently. Now we've almost evened up the time. I think I should be pressing here. If I were to guess an engine eval, I mean, I'd probably say plus 0.7, maybe plus 0.5. I don't think this is a +2 position. Black is a little too active and not so far behind in material that it's disastrous for them. The D and the C pawns side by side are very nice here, especially in view of my knight position on b3. This knight is highly restricted. But black is going to have to continue playing actively. They need to push the pace, because if I get to play queen d2, rook e1, that's going to turn out well for me. So yeah, knight d7, that's more or less what I expected. And how to counter this, because bishop takes b2 is a threat. So queen d2, I mean, that move is obvious. I think what I had in mind too, queen d2, c4, knight d4. What if black just plays directly with knight c5 then? Knight c5. Knight b5. Queen b6. Knight c3. So if knight d3, knight takes d5. Black's got some firepower coming down the file. Queen d2 just ticks all the right boxes, though, I think. I like that move. I can meet rook b8 with rook b1. Queen d2, rook b8, rook b1, c4. Knight a5 even. Threatening knight takes c4. Somehow looks a little shaky with my knight there, but maybe. Queen d2. Queen c2 is another option. But the thing I don't like about queen c2 is on c4, I can't play knight d4. So that's why queen d2 seems appealing to me, to at least have that option. So queen d2, c4, knight d4. What if queen b6? Hitting the knight, probably rook d1. But knight c5 is still a thing. Trying to quickly jump into d3. Could be annoying. Black's pretty active there. I mean, knight a5 right away? Is that crazy? Bishop takes b2, knight c4. Looks kind of absurd to play knight a5, but maybe. I played crazier moves in my chess career. Yeah, it's just, this knight is so poorly placed. That's what it comes down to. Could start with rook b1. Knight a5. Because if queen b6, queen takes d5 probably works. Take that pawn in the center. Very strange, knight a5. Feels like I almost have to play queen d2 after that. But concretely, how does black actually deal with knight a5? Even if it looks weird. Nah, I think it's a little too risky to play in this exact position. I do feel like coordinating might be cleaner. But if I coordinate queen d2, we just play some natural series of moves like, what was it, c4? I mean, maybe then knight a5? I think that's one thing I was considering, to threaten knight takes c4. Maybe I just forego this whole knight d4 thing. Yeah, this might be the way to go. It looks very weird, but something with knight a5 might be the way to play this position. Okay, let's play queen d2. I can't continue spending time in a pretty flexible position. So it's probably the most natural move in the position. Develop, defend b2, connect the rooks. So on c4, am I playing knight a5? Am I just going for this? Threatens knight takes c4. That's very appealing. A very appealing aspect of this move. It might give me time to play rook d1, pressure the pawn. Part of the issue is I can't play b3 so easily, though, because of c3. But it might give me time to do something like that. I feel like if c4, knight d4, then knight c5. Well, knight b5. If queen b6, queen takes d5 might work. The idea queen takes b5. Oh, no, I don't have b4. Definitely don't have b4. So c4, knight d4, knight c5, knight b5, queen b6, probably knight c3. And then if knight d3, knight takes d5, queen takes b2. Ay, that's a lot of arrows. We trade queens. I go rook to d1. And for the moment, I think I'm holding up the black c-pawn, but that's not simple. There's no knight f6 because the bishop guards. Feels like I am probably somewhat better there, but that's complicated. This isn't easy for black as well because I'm not forcing the pace in some way. I'm not even playing rook e1. Yeah, so this is what I was hoping to achieve maybe by doing what I did, is make black play rook b8 voluntarily. So rook b8 played. Now if I go rook a to d1, let's say, c4, queen takes d5, I think black has knight f6 at the end. So that probably doesn't work. So do I have to go rook b1 here in view of c4? Or, hey, can I play rook c1? Because I can meet c4 with rook takes c4. Ooh. That would be a welcome improvement, if so. Uh-huh. Rook c1. Yeah, I would love to hold up c4. So on rook c1, how is black realistically going to play? Queen c6? But then I feel like at a minimum I have some improvement compared to that last line. Also, maybe I could play knight takes c5 and b4. Really direct. Ooh, did black give me an opening here with rook c1? Maybe. And all of a sudden, black is a little tied down to the defense of the c-pawn. Maybe, maybe. Bishop f8 to defend the queen. Maybe rook f to d1. I would love to shift the momentum here, too, in the short term, black, generating some activity. Could they play rook b4? Rook c1, rook b4. I might have knight takes c5. Rook takes b2. Rook takes b2, queen a5. Which looks a little shaky, but actually should be okay towards my king, I think. So do I switch it up and play rook c1? I think so. I like that. I'm liking it because it makes black's queen eye those pawns. Black can play rook b6 as well, but rook b6, rook f to d1. And I'm still holding black up. Or am I? Yeah, I am, I think. Okay, c1, rook b6, rook f d1, c4, rook takes c4, take. Get a big trade. Black takes here at the end. Take. Yeah, that should be good. Let's do it. He says as he hesitates. Yeah, let's do it. So this is based on a little pin tactic. Took me a while to appreciate that. c4, rook takes c4. Keeps black's knight at bay, too. So I'm actually trying to turn the knight on b3 into a strength of some sort by doing this. That's what it boils down to. Black could maybe play a5 in this position. That's a move I didn't consider, but it's possible. a5. Trying to deflect my queen or knight. That's the point. So queen takes a5, then c4, when my knight all of a sudden looks very, very strange. Or queen takes, knight takes a5, rook takes b2. I do have knight c4 then, after rook takes b2, but rook takes d2, knight takes d2, rook takes a2 at minimum. Feels like I'm fighting against those pawns. So I think on a5, I might actually not want to take the pawn. I might want to play rook c2. Allow a4, but then go knight a5. Knight to a5. Man, this whole operation looks really weird, but it also feels somewhat principled at the same time. Because I just wasn't liking those lines where c4, knight d4, knight c5 get played. Seems like black gets too much activity there. a5 is kind of a tough move. Black might find it. I think a player like this can definitely find it, but it's a bit hard to appreciate at first blush. You just might not even consider it. But the point for black is they want to break through the B file. That's why they might look to do something like this. So a5, am I really playing rook c2 and then meeting a4 with knight c4? There's queen a6 there, which hits my rook on f1. I can play rook d1. d5 is loose for black at that point. But so is my knight. So is my knight on the edge of the board. I hope they don't find a5. That looks best to me. I feel less confident, definitely, compared to b takes c5 earlier, where black was sacking the exchange, that they're going to find a5. I think that's maybe a 50-50 chance. But if I determine I shouldn't take that pawn, that creates some practical issues for me. Queen takes a5 is what I'd like to do, but yeah, and they find it. Well spotted. Well spotted. So queen takes a5, c4. Is there anything I can do there? I don't think so. Oh, wait a second. Knight d2? Knight d2, bishop takes b2, probably at minimum. I was thinking if there's rook takes b2, queen d8 or something. But not so sure about that. So rook c2, a4, knight a5. Queen a6, rook d1. Rook a8, queen takes d5. Man, what's going on? Knight f6. Queen takes c5. They take on a5 at the ends. It's like two rooks and an extra pawn for me against rook, bishop, knight. Tricky business. Rook d1, a4, queen takes d5. I don't think works either. So rook c2, knight a5. Could go knight c1 as well, but that feels a little passive. Don't know that I want to do that here. Maybe, though. Maybe. And knight takes a5, rook takes b2, knight c4. It's cool looking, but I think it just lets black get that position. I don't know if I trust that position. I don't know that I'm worse there, but I don't like it. Okay. Let's go rook c2. I need to save some time. Maybe I play knight c1. That might be just the better decision in this position. Just go knight c1, play it safe. Because knight a5, I feel like my knight is really loose there. I would like to play it, but not sure I buy my knight standing on that square. There's nothing wrong with knight c1. It just looks kind of passive. Black still can't play c4, I don't think. Rook takes c4, queen a6. Queen takes d5. I don't know. Okay, let's go knight c1. I think I need to be practical with the time situation. Knight a5 looks a little too off kilter. I don't like that there's queen a6 lurking on knight a5. There's that line where black could win a little material back. So I got creative with how I placed my rook. I rejected rook b1 in favor of rook c1. I figured I'd probably have to move the knight from b3 at some point anyways. So this still feels okay, but I need to do some rearranging nonetheless. Main thing is to continue preventing black from latching on to good squares as best I can. I might go for b3 soon, by the way. That's something that could be handy if I want to control the c4 square and try to get a pawn trade, blockade, and then hopefully attack black's weaknesses in the long run. No easy games in the Lone Wolf League, guys. I don't think I've had a single short game this season. Seems like every game goes down to the wire. This is great, though. It's competitive. It's fun. You never know what you're going to get each week, and everyone I face is good. So shout out to all my opponents, everyone who decided to play this league. Still not easy for black. I can sympathize with what black is going through here because I played flexible positions like this before with the black pieces, or any side really. But what black's experiencing here, not easy. Okay, knight e5. So this seems to invite rook d1 or b3. Rook d1 or b3. Where's black going with that move? Because isn't rook d1 pretty natural here for me? Knight c4 is not a threat. I take it. So what's the deal? They're going to play d4, but if they play d4, I feel like b3 should be good. Or knight d3 even. There's nothing towards my king. We've been kind of ignoring the king side this whole time, but there's nothing there. Oh, there's also queen a5 I can think about, but that invites knight c4. Queen takes a4, knight e3. So rook d1 feels correct. Just don't get what the plan is for black with this move. c4 maybe? No, that can't be right. c4 can't be the move they're trying. Maybe knight c6. Rook d1, knight c6. As if take, take. There's knight b4. Uh-huh. Rook d1, knight c6. Can play knight e2, but still knight b4. Okay, knight c6 is sort of tricky. So maybe I want to play b3 here, actually. Tick-tock. But rook d1, knight c6, very sneaky. Yeah, I think that's the plan for my opponent. And if so, is b3 the way? b3 still knight c6, but then I can take on a4 at least. Or knight d3 maybe. Gotta make up my mind soon. Queen f4 is another move that comes to mind. Looks a little wrong. Let's go b3. Rook d1 was natural. I, in many ways, wish I would have been able to play that, but don't think I was quite able to justify it. Black's trying their best to activate that knight. Could black play a3? A3, maybe queen A5. Black takes, okay. Yeah, so A takes was my main thought here. Let's do it. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that trade by me because in some ways I might have been better off trying to activate, but I didn't see a good response to rook d1, knight c6 in the moment. So at least now I never have to worry about the pressure on the b pawn. I also control the c4 square a bit better. Now black can still play knight c6, yeah, and I think this was their whole idea. This whole operation. So knight d3, knight d4. Knight d3, knight d4. Rook takes c5, knight takes b3. Okay, so if knight d4 is a thing, how do I meet that? Knight d2, but knight d2, knight b4, or knight e2, I mean. No, knight e2, oh, knight e2, rook takes b3, of course. Annoying. Rook a2, knight b4, that'd probably be okay. Looks a little weird, but it might be okay. Yeah, let's try to activate. I definitely don't like my knight being fairly ineffective here on c1 in the short term, but I think I still need to play to consolidate. So knight b4, perhaps. Knight b4, queen d3. But then knight takes b3 is possible. Ugh. Yeah, knight d4, I'm not so sure what I'm going to do. Tricky. Rook a3, maybe? It looks so passive. Rook a3, c4, though. Might have to just give the pawn and try to play actively at that point. Like I'd like to play rook d1, but after knight takes b3, okay, black plays rook b7. What's up with that? Does he want queen b8? That's a strange move. Okay, rook a6 might be good here. Try to activate and pin. I could also throw on a check, but I kind of like keeping black's king on the back rank. Wow. Yeah, let's go rook a6. Trying to avoid severe time pressure. I know you guys are already worried about my clock, and I am too. Let's seize this moment to activate. I don't get this move at all. Maybe queen b8 or something, but So So how does black work out of this? d5, queen d5. All of a sudden it looks awkward, but d5 maybe queen e2. Idea queen d5, queen e8. Okay, so queen d7. Stepping back. So black still probably wants knight d4. It seems. Can I attack that pawn on c5 somehow? Not simple. Queen c2 maybe? Queen c2 knight b4 though. Queen c2 I think I can actually play. Because knight b4, rook a8. Let's do it. Blundering knight b4, but then this check comes in handy. Makes way for knight d3 too, perhaps. Still very paranoid about where this knight can go. Knights are tricky beasts. Bishop f8 maybe. The idea of knight d3, knight d4. Kind of living on the 30-second increment in a sharp position. So not ideal, but I still have the material edge. Still pressing as best I can. I mean, I'd love to play rook d1 next if I could, but I'm going to have to address knight b4 pretty soon, probably. We'll see how black defends. But maybe I can go rook d1, assuming there's still rook a8 check on board. Even if black somehow defends this pawn, like rook b5 or something. Bishop f8, I think, makes sense. Bishop f8, maybe I play rook a8 voluntarily, try to capitalize on the pin. Queen takes c5 would be a threat then. I'd love to trade a pair of rooks, so if black meets rook a8 with rook b8, that'd be great. Actually, kind of a tricky moment for black. I'm not sure what they should do. So let's see if we can capitalize on that. Rook b5, knight d3, perhaps? The idea of knight d4, knight takes c5, is that possible? Maybe, but probably black can play queen c7 or something there. Bishop d4, whoa. Not a move I considered, but knight d3 looks obvious in reply. Yeah, let's play it. Guard the square, hit the pawn. black just going to try to play knight b4 and maybe swap pieces. But then I feel like I can maybe go on the attack against their king. Something with rook e1, maybe rook takes g6 pops in somewhere. Black's going to be in time pressure here real soon. They're already kind of in it. Suddenly I'm coordinating. Big threat. Yeah, I think they might have to play knight b4 and hope for the best. Knight b4, rook a8 check. Or do I just take the knight and go from there? Probably just take the knight. It seems kind of risky to do anything else. Yeah. Take the knight and rook e1. Yeah, let's take. Okay. So rook e1. Rook takes g6 is very tempting, but I think premature. Rook e1, king g7, though. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing there. Maybe I can get some stuff going towards their king, though. I'm going to play this move. It seems constructive. Maybe now rook a8? Trying to coordinate towards their king. But what am I doing on queen b5? Queen d3 is another option. Let's go queen d3. Kind of play it safe. Trying to connect with the rook, still guard the pawn on b3. Queen b7. Queen b7, rook a3, I was thinking. There's bishop b2, though. Maybe queen b7, I play rook b1. The c4 isn't playable yet, because I take. And I take with check, too. It's annoying for black. Still tense. Still up the point of material, but black's pretty well coordinated. King's pretty safe. King g7 was a smart move last move, just not allowing any shenanigans with rook takes g6. I'm trying to toe the line between being active, but also not getting too reckless. Yeah, queen b7. Let's go rook b1. So again, c4, queen takes d4 is check. So black can't do that. So it stands to reason they might want to move the bishop. Like bishop e5, even though it's on a loose square. Bishop b5, rook a5, perhaps. c4, queen takes d5. I don't know. There could be some situation where the pawn gets to b2 in the end. Might be annoying. Not sure who's playing for a win there. Probably black, if that happens, but long ways from getting there. h5, waiting move. Okay. So rook d6 makes sense. It's a weird move, but it might make sense. Let's try it. So still playing off of this queen takes d4 idea. Just trying to make it awkward for black to move, honestly. Okay. I'd like to do something around my own king, but I don't really know what to do. I'm not sure I want to play h3. Maybe h4, but nah, I think I should go h3. Let's play like that. There's queen d2 check. So I have that as an option, but seems hard for both sides to make progress somehow. Sort of strange, but maybe true. I guess I can go queen d1 if I want to. How do I actually do something from here? So if I move my b rook, I lose the b pawn. I could go for a queen trade, queen a6, but trade c4 has me somewhat concerned. Yeah, black waits. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Plays f6. That gives me rook e6 now. If I want it. Ooh, could I go on the attack maybe? Rook e1, rook takes b3, queen d2, and then quickly double the rooks. Rook e1, rook takes b3, queen d2 check, king g7, double the rooks, bishop e5, take. Ooh, I might have a chance here. I'm going to try to seize this chance. This is a little risky, but I'm going to try it. Time's getting low for both sides, so let's see. Trying to coordinate. I don't know. King g7, rook e6, bishop c3, rook e7, I think should be good for me, but it's not so clear. Yeah, that should be good for me, I think. I don't know. I'm going for it. Plays king h7. So now I thought rook over. There is bishop e5, but then f4 is what I was thinking. Or take, and queen g5, more brute force. Okay, rook over. So on bishop e5, can I capture? Pawn takes e5, queen g5, and all of a sudden, black's king is super weak. And I have rook e7 coming, and my king is just safe enough. I might have found something good here. For a moment, I hallucinated and thought black could play their rook back to b7, but I think I can take in queen g5. So harmless check on b1, but then h3 comes in super handy. There's also rook b2, but then rook e7. This seems cleaner than f4. Yeah, especially because black has queen d7. Take. Whew. I think I'm winning now. There might be a cleanup job to do, but I think I should be winning. Queen g5 is killer. Because black played one too many weakening pawn moves, like that f6 move. That really cost black now. Get into their king. They're going to have 3 beautiful pawns in the center, but it probably won't matter. Yeah, and I think I should be able to pick off these pawns. There might be a conversion phase here, but I think black will probably only end up with 1 passed pawn with their rook. Should be gradually losing for them. This is exactly the turn of events I was kind of gambling on with this whole rook d6, rook e1 thing. I think if black had sat tight there, not moved their f-pawn and moved their king around, I probably would have had to offer to repeat or something. I wasn't seeing a way to make progress. But let's not get cocky yet, because we still got to win this game. And now I'm really glad h5, h3 was thrown in, because otherwise I'd be getting back rank mated here. Oh, they said good game in the chat. Are they going to resign? It does look lost. I mean, I think black could try to struggle on. Wow, they resign. With that, we win the final round game. Thank you to my opponent. Good game. That was a very tense one. And I'm not sure I was better even leading up to the end. I think when I was playing knight c1, my opponent found an amazing move with a5. Very impressive move there. I mentioned that they might find this, but it's still a bit of a difficult move to conceive of when there's 2 pieces that can capture. So I don't know. This was tense. I think rook b7 really did me a big favor. I don't get that move for black. We were both getting low on the clock round about this moment. But yeah, rook b7, it ended up causing a lot of problems for black on the back rank. Enabled me to play rook a6, really, because I was thinking knight b4 or knight d4 in this position instead of rook b7. But yeah, later on, after the knights got traded, again, I was feeling like I was gambling a bit with rook d6 because my rook is in no man's land here. But with black being unable to move the bishop now without losing the pawn on c4, it seemed justified. And c4 always runs into queen takes d4. So yeah, had black quickly played instead of f6, king g7, I think I probably would have had to play it safe and maybe offer to repeat somehow. I don't even know exactly how, like rook back to a6 or maybe queen d1. I think black was doing okay. But that's how fast chess games can turn around. I've been on the receiving end of this sort of thing. So I noticed these really strong players, they seize the moment when opportunities like f6 arise. And I've had a couple opportunities like this in the Lone Wolf League. The game I lost to Happy Mode, I misfired. I sensed that there was a moment and then I misfired. And then the game against, who was it? Not Antazi. Oh, I can't remember the player's name. But the game where I had king, bishop, and 2 pawns, 2 rook pawns against king and bishop, that opposite color bishop ending, I failed to seize a win there right at the end, also after circumstances changed abruptly. But I'm very proud of myself that I didn't do that this time. And I think this is winning. I think rook e6. Maybe black can play king g7, rook e6. That might not make a difference, actually, because the threat of rook e7 is so strong. I was thinking king f7, but then queen h6 is probably killer. That should be winning. So I think this position's lost for black already. Could black maybe play g5 here? That might be the best thing to do. Keep the king safe, but it still looks kind of sketchy around black's king. And I'm saying, yeah, you can have at it on the queen side, and I know you got those center pawns, but your king is looking dicey. Okay, yeah. So I feel like I dodged some potential complications in the opening. I'm actually pretty happy with what I got in the middle game. I was surprised black let me target their rooks with my bishops like this. But Bulgakov found the right line with b takes c5, and this was just not simple to wrap our head around, our collective heads around. Again, I feel like the engine's going to say white's somewhat better, half pawn maybe, but black has quite a bit of compensation. If we look at this from black's point of view, from the position here, this looks plenty active with that dark square bishop, the d and the c pawns. And remember, black's only down 1 point of material. So why don't we see what the engine has to say? Thanks again, everyone, for watching this live. I'm going to be very curious to see the commentary. Shout out to Jordan in the league, and I think a couple other people, Buffer Runner, I want to say, and someone else. I don't remember exactly who. My apologies, but they were streaming this game live. So let's take a look at the raw stats. 2 inaccuracies, 1 mistake, 0 blunders, 19 average centi-pawn loss for 93% accuracy. For me, 2 inaccuracies, 1 mistake, 2 blunders for 31 average centi-pawn loss for my opponent. So this looks a little higher, and it is higher than some other games I've had in the league for both my opponent and I, but in a sharp position, sharp game like this, I don't think that's so surprising. And whoa, I can't help but notice straight off the bat, this was equal, but bishop e5 was the move that did black in. Oh, rook b1. Aha, rook b1. Not a move I considered. Is that the only move that saves black? So king g7 or king h7 are okay here. And actually for me, wow, that's subtle. It wants me to play rook e6 right away instead of rook e1. That's a hard distinction to make, though. Rook e1 in a way felt more natural, actually, to try to connect the rooks right away. Whoa, look at this in the middle game. That's crazy. No way. I'm actually somewhat worse. So I severely overestimated my position. Man, engines are ruthless. It says this is all good for black. No way. This line is just better for black. I'm laughing because it's just so funny how your human impression. I think most humans, when they see this sequence in particular, bishop a6, rook c7, bishop f4, rook e7, bishop d6, and then this long pause that black had here after bishop b5. All right, black found the best move, but doesn't it seem like something has gone wrong for black and that white is winning material? But okay, I got to go back to the drawing board with this opening and figure out how to refute or at least respond to e5. Because what I did, brings no advantage. And in fact, I was worse, according to the computer. So yeah, e5, because most players in this position, they just play d6 or castles, and then you get into a mainline King's Indian. And I thought this is what we might get, what we would probably get, because we saw at least one King's Indian game from this opponent. So I thought that was their plan, but e5 totally surprised me. Yeah, and I don't remember how this goes. Knight takes e5, because black can either play knight takes e4, or there's this trendy castles move, which is a pawn sacrifice. And then if, let's say, d4, rook e8, and with d6 coming up, it's a little awkward for white. Let's just say white plays something like this, c5. Yeah, I was not eager to get into something like this. d5 or c takes d4. I mean, compared to the game, maybe this is better, but there's plenty of ways black can play actively. And it's a gap in my preparation. I think, to allow this. I'll have to figure out how to respond to this move. But kudos to my opponent for that piece of prep, because this was a nice way to hinder d4, or at least be able to trade pawns after d4. And you can see in the Masters database, like the engine, knight takes e5 is the critical move here. I briefly thought about g3, going for some English fianchetto, but that looks weird with my knight on f3. I would prefer my bishop not to be blocked. So, and it feels like chickening out. At least d4 felt consistent with how I handle a lot of these positions. And we're still following 140 master games. So the stats, though, are excellent for black here. Look at that. Black wins a large percentage of the time. Even Ding Liren has had to defend this position for black. Okay. Yeah, this is some slightly more modern stuff that I'm just not aware of. Castles. Okay, bishop g5 looks a little familiar to try to hinder d5. How does this go? Apparently doesn't even hinder it if black wants to play it right away, but yeah, this is something with probably g5 cropping up. How does this work? E takes d5, c takes d5, and then castles, because if pawn takes g5, bishop f2, knight takes d5, and black is not worse. Got it. I'm just seeing a sea of black wins and draws from here. Just know, probably in the Lichess database, it'll be similar. Because I think players who do this as black are probably pretty strong and know what they're doing. Yeah, d5, wow. So if you're a King's Indian player or you dabble in these positions, this line might be a good one to look at. It's relevant to the move order I chose in the game. Knight f3, c4, knight c3, and then e4. Trying to play d4 later. So you can't do it if white plays d4 here. But I didn't play d4 here because I thought black might try to duck into a Grunfeld with d5. So, wow. So fascinating. Chess is such a rich game, guys. I'm curious, what was your, if you're watching this analysis, first of all, thank you, and thank you for following this series, but what was your assessment of the position in the middle game? Because I was talking up my position. I was even so confident as to assert that I thought I was a half pawn better or more around here after I banked the exchange, but the engine blows that out of the water. It says -2 for black. It says, John, you'd be lucky not to lose this position. It's fascinating, but also in a way, it can be a little demoralizing when you see something like that, because it just tells me that even I, as an international master, I have so much to learn and try to appreciate about chess. So I guess I was anchoring a bit too much into the material in that game, and discounting black's activity so much. Yeah. Well, I do think the principal thing is this knight takes e5 move, and trying to prove an edge here somehow. Looks like knight f3 is the main way to do it. Rook e8. How does this go? d3. Does black play d5 then? Yeah, I'm just not familiar with this whatsoever. Knight takes d5. This looks like a modern pawn sacrifice. You know? Like, as in most, I bet a lot of these games in this have been played recently. Yeah, all games from the 2000s and beyond. I probably should know this, but this is a thing when you're not actively preparing for tournaments, studying chess theory. Theory will pass you by in an instant in chess. So, wow. Yeah. So I just, on instinct, tried to avoid this stuff. Maybe knight takes e5 isn't even so relevant anymore, because I think this line and then d4 is supposed to be pretty good for white. Bishop g5. Even here, though, there's some theory. So apparently they don't really play this anymore for black, though. It's all about knight takes e5, castles, and then rook e8 and some quick break in the center while white is tending to their extra pawn. Fascinating. So I went d4, which is the second best move. Thought I was playing kind of principally. There's one master game where white played c5 here, but after knight c6 or even queen e7, black is significantly better, according to the computer. Wow. Knight b3. I'm already fighting from a -1 position. Yeah, and h6 I felt like was a mistake. I just didn't really like that for black. It's so curious that the engine, like, I could accept if this was -0.2 or 0.3 for black, but -1? when black has an isolated pawn, and development-wise, we're more or less equal. We both need to get our queenside bishop and both rooks into the game. That's a very surprising evaluation to me, but I guess it's because black enjoys great long-term activity. Their knights are more centralized. Their dark square bishop is clearly more influential than my light square bishop. And I think a big thing in all these lines, I've weakened my king with f3. So that move I played to support the pawn on e4, that comes back to bite me in a lot of cases. It's a common move in this type of setup, but white would prefer to keep the position closed. And with this whole c6, d5 thing, black's saying, I'm not going to let you have any rest. You're going to have to play with an open position because I want to get d5 in almost no matter what. So I thought h6 wasn't as good. I thought a6 maybe here. And yeah, I was probably going to have to figure out some way to coordinate rook e1 maybe to start. But I guess always this bishop f4 move can be hit with knight h5, or the engine's giving d4 a lot of times. d4, knight d5, yeah. And here's another case where I really regret the f3 move because the e3 square is so weak. This knight can work its way in, and I feel like I'm playing on the edges now, trying to do something with knight b6, but it's clearly not working. So h6, I felt like gave me a bit of something to work with, but it's actually the second move according to the engine. So knight b5, yeah, b6 is fine. Allowing the knight in is fine. Thought maybe rook e7 here, because that rook e7 actually, maybe I didn't appreciate or even see this in the game, but that prevents all these ideas with bishop e7. And also, yeah, if we play rook c7 here, bishop f4, I was thinking knight e5, but even here, wow, even here, sacking the exchange is -3 for black. Are you kidding me? Wow. Still white's up 1 point of material, but here I could see the bishop on a6 being pretty awkward. I definitely can't take this pawn because of queen b6. Yeah, there's too many threats. Too awkward for my knight, my pin knight and bishop. So rook e6, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, bishop a6. This all felt consistent. And I was happy to see what black did. I thought some of these other moves might be better, like rook a8. I think I was tagging as maybe being the best move. Okay, okay. The engine says rook b8, a move I thought that was just flat out bad because it gets the rook trapped. It says that's good, and it again is because of b takes c5. So the computer is just very hyped about black's compensation in all these lines. Let's say bishop takes b8, queen takes b8. And yeah, the presence of the bishop being on board, which is ostensibly a loose piece in almost all these situations, that really hurts white. I can retreat and try to save the bishop somehow, but I'm getting run over by a freight train now. c4. Yeah, knight c5, queen b6. This is lights out practically. Or c4, knight d2. Black can take on b2. Then they're not even down any material. They've got 2 pawns and a piece for the exchange. Yikes. Yeah, so I misassessed this, but I'm learning some stuff. And I think a lot of this was just a product of the opening, not appreciating how much dynamic potential black has out of this. So the gist of this seems to be that even with black giving up an exchange here, black gets plenty of activity with b takes c5 at the end, with the 2 beautiful pawns in the center, lots of minor pieces to work with, and white having some pieces that can get run over by the pawns and the piece play, and a king that's almost always vulnerable down the g1, a7 diagonal at some point. So it looks like the way this went down, yeah, I actually should have played bishop takes c5, the move that I mentioned, but I felt like was chickening out. Computer says I should do this to avoid what happens in the game. But yeah, I thought black had a kind of easy time of things here, something like knight c5. Evidently, this was a better option, though. Huh. Yeah, queen takes d5, I guess, at the end, at the very least. So bishop takes c6, and then rook takes d6 is even better here. Wow. Rook takes d6. I think both my opponent and I thought queen takes was clearly best. But knight takes e8. Really? Okay, because that hits the pawn, and I guess I might have problems getting my knight to a good square. c4, knight d4, queen b6. Even rook d1 to support, knight c7 coming in. Wow, even these positions where there's just a straight-up trade, even this is bad for me. Much, much worse. I have a hard time guarding the b-pawn. And if rook b1, rook b6, preparing bishop takes f2. Or if b3, c3, probably. And then these two pawns are rolling. Wow. So that was possible too, but even queen takes d6, even the way this went down. Okay, and here, I played king h1, but the computer says much better is rook c1. To hinder this. But isn't there c4, rook takes c4, queen b6? To try to open this up? There is, but the computer says you should be lucky to go down this line, John, to try to give the material back and maybe stabilize. Even this is better for black. That's wild. Because I'm just looking at the raw strategic stats. I've got a blockading knight on d4. Black has isolated d and a pawns. But none of that matters. None of that matters. Black doesn't even have to propose a knight trade right away. h5. I think it's the general looseness of my position with this f3 move. Probably with the pawn on f2, it probably wouldn't even make much of a difference, but rook d1, h4. Very modern sort of play, which is probably why I'm not so familiar with this whole line and how black gets play in this variation, because it screams engine-approved preparation, modern players analyzing with engines and seeing how stuff like this develops. And like I said, chess theory can pass you by if you're not constantly interested in refreshing your understanding of that sort of thing. But for where I'm at in my chess career, I'm just happy and smiling to have a game like this, where it gives me an opportunity to broaden my understanding and also share it with you guys. Because again, I'd be very curious what you guys thought during this game about the evaluation. So king h1 is bad. I need to play rook c1. I guess it's that important to hinder c4, or at least to give material back if c4 is played. Yeah, try to play some position like this, the computer thinks. Still suffering a little bit, but manageable. Black's just that active and has a full board to work with, and my king is always somewhat in question. So king h1. Now on c4 right away, what was I thinking about doing? I think I was considering knight d4, knight d7, and then knight b5 to hit the queen. So how does the engine address this? Queen c6, knight c3, d4, and the pawns roll. Okay, because if knight e4, I guess there's always f5 stuff even, or knight f6, knight b6. There's all this oblique maneuvering, sort of maneuvering around what seems to be the center of the action in the middle of the board, but the engine seems very content to just play on the edges. Knight b6 to get to d5. And then, yeah, it seemed like there was an outpost that black could try to carve out in a lot of these middle games. So, okay, I started with king h1. I felt like I had to prioritize that move, but knight d7, queen d2, rook b8, and I found a good move here, rook c1. That was a timely find, but the computer thinks c4 is better. Now, what was I planning to do against c4? Again, knight d4 comes to mind, but I might have played knight a5 in this instance to try to threaten knight takes c4. Then rook c8, still -3. Rook c1, try to layer this on. Queen a6. Yeah, and I mean, you just play some of these lines out, and somehow my coordination is always kind of bad. c3 is a threat. And what about a stabilizing move? Knight d4, knight c5, or knight e5? Knight c5. Yeah, so this was the type of position I was worried about occurring. But it's just depressing how bad it is. I would have thought maybe I have some way to give material back or keep black's advantage to a minimum, but the engine's saying I'm on the brink of defeat. So c4 was good. Knight a5, rook c8, just nice and calm. And what's black's next move? So if I play something like this, I guess there's c3 I might have to worry about, but still this queen a6 move. Black can even allow this, huh? There's a knight b6. And they have a hard time controlling this knight again. This is why I didn't play knight a5 in the game coming up, by the way. So queen d2 and rook b8, that gets the double question mark for black. I guess c4 is just that much better, pushing the pace. Yeah, rook c1. And I'd be satisfied if I played largely okay up through the end of the game, just seeing the evaluation here. Because it felt like I was still trying to get maybe an advantage if I could calm this position down. So a5 I thought was strong, but there's other moves too. Bishop f8, rook c8. So is queen takes a5 out of the question because of c4? Yeah, this didn't feel good. My knight getting pushed around like this and the b2 pawn falling. The computer does say knight takes a5 is best. Aha, so it actually wants to pursue this line. So I saw this line, but I figured if anyone was pressing here, it had to be black in the end because of these strong pawns. Evidently, I can save this for a draw somehow. Maybe I have a decent blockade going is why. But this didn't quite seem the way to go if I want to win this game. So I played rook c2. That's the third best move. Yeah, it wants the knight takes a5 thing. a4, knight c1. So on knight a5, what didn't I like here? I didn't like queen a6, which hits the rook on f1. Rook d1. And then I think rook a8, queen takes d5, and then knight f6. Apparently knight b6 is also good, maybe better. But I saw a position like this. And again, I thought maybe I'm not worse, or maybe I could draw this, but it didn't seem like it was going to be better for me. I don't know, though. This feels like almost anything could happen in view of rook takes f7. I probably am a little worse. Computer doesn't fear this. But it'd be easy for either side to blunder. So that's why I didn't play knight a5. Went knight c1. And this was clever, knight e5, preparing knight c6. I thought knight e5 was just bad at first. It's also recommending bishop f8 in a lot of these lines. Stabilizing move. But okay, knight e5. And I played b3. So I didn't play rook d1 because of knight c6, which took me a while to spot. But this is another case where the engine says, actually, that's your best bet. Allow the fork to happen at the end and play this. Yeah, another position I thought if anyone was better, it was going to be black. Because black evens up the material. Their a-pawn is still somewhat of a concern. If the a-pawns are gone, this is just dead equal. But, yeah, I don't know. a3 still feels like I have some concerns in this position. Although it's probably objectively going to be hard for both sides to make progress. So I played b3. That's a mistake. Takes, it says knight c6 is better. Ignoring b takes a4 because of knight b4 and the rook's trapped. What was I planning on knight c6? I think knight d3? No, but knight d3, knight d4. I don't know what I was planning on knight c6. Maybe I missed that this actually just traps the rook because of knight b4. Not even knight d4. Knight b4 is a threat. Oh, knight d3 maybe. Yeah, knight d3. How does this work? Take, take. Knight d4 though. Uh-huh. This is another case where I can try to bail out. But even here I'm worse. Looks shaky. So black let me off the hook a bit. A takes b3 and then knight c6. And now my rook has more maneuverability. If they had kept the pair of pawns on board, knight c6, knight b4, I don't have rook a2 in response to knight c6. So A takes B3, A takes B3, knight C6, rook A2. Good move. Okay. Happy about that. Yeah, it felt like my rook needed some freedom at this point. Yeah, and rook B7, I really am unsure why my opponent did that. They're still better, but now it looks a little less dire for me in the short term. Knight D4 is recommended. What was I going to do against that move? Queen D3, maybe? Queen D3, knight takes C4, though. I don't know. I think I might have mentioned knight D4 and was pondering how to play against that and maybe wasn't coming up with anything. But I think on Queen D3, yeah, black can take with the idea knight takes B3, C4 with the fork. So that does look good. Might have to let that pawn fall. Yeah, and I was considering lines like rook D1, but I don't think it actually does anything in terms of allowing me to win a pawn back. Because if ever I do take that pawn on D5, I run into rook B1 at the end. Again, a symptom of my king position. So rook B7, that felt like it gave me some new lease on life. Rook A6. You know, gradually in playing this middle game after black lost the exchange, I was seeing why it was difficult, but it was almost like my brain was refusing to believe I was worse. You know that feeling? So this is a great game for my own understanding. Yeah, so rook A6, queen D7, because black's tied up now. They have to get out of that pin and keep their D-pawn defended. Queen C2 is a good move. I almost didn't play it, but now it's important that knight B4 can be met by rook A8, and then queen takes C5. So bishop D4, I didn't consider that move. I thought maybe bishop F8, but bishop F8, queen C3 seemed interesting. Maybe not best, but seemed playable. Also rook A8, I think I mentioned, to threaten queen takes C5. Because now it feels like black's somewhat on their back foot. I could always take and take on C5 if I want to bail. But it also feels like I can bring more pieces into the action. And black's not worse, but yeah, I've navigated most of it now. So bishop D4, knight D3. Says rook A8 or knight E2. Knight E2 is very somewhat unnatural, although it does hit the bishop. Yeah, I want some combination of knight E2 and rook A8 like this to try to, I guess, break down the C5 and D4 construction. Something like this. Huh. Go F5. Wow. It's creative. But knight D3 seemed more normal. And I think knight B4 was a good call. That move makes sense in view of knight takes C5 being a threat. Yeah, and I can't play knight takes C5 because black can take on C2, and then if I take their queen, they take with their rook. Guess there's even other moves the computer is saying as well. So we get to this position. Yeah, and I'm no better here. If anything, I'm slightly worse still. Rook E1. Still up the point of material, but black dominates the pawn action in the center and just enjoys great coordination. Yeah, I think I defended pretty tenaciously here. I think I came up with a couple clever ways of forestalling any black progress that they can make. So rook B1, defend the pawn, the queen holds A6, C4, the interference move is always met by queen takes D4. And now we were both checking time. Rook D6, I like this decision too. It just seemed like the best way to try to continue freezing black's options. Is now if the bishop moves, I can play the capture on D5. Although, is that even true? Bishop E5, rook takes D5, C4. Yeah, I thought about something like this, but even here, I guess in the end, the pressure on the B pawn is enough for black. And I have to try to make a draw. There's situations like this where I think I was mentioning a scenario like this where it wasn't clear to me who was playing for a win. The computer says equal, but probably in practice it's going to be way easier to play as black because they're going to go B2, and the bishop and the rook always control that pass pawn or support that pass pawn. But objectively probably drawn because I can probably always get both my rooks to attack that pawn. at the moment black tries to move their rook away, I take it. So probably hard for black to make progress. But yeah, I like my decisions. Queen d3, rook b1, rook d6. And now the computer thinks this is objectively equal. And it's suggesting similar lines of play as the game, unless black's going to go for something forcing like this, which is possible, but I can see why they didn't do that in the game. So king h6, h3. I expressed some hesitancy about this move because I would prefer to make luft for the king that's not on a dark square. Because although I have access to h2, with bishop e5 always lurking, it's debatable if my king's even that much safer. Could even be a liability. But I also didn't like g3 because of black's queen lurking on the long diagonal. So that also seemed wrong in some way. So h3. Yeah, and I think black should have just played king g7. I know this is easy to say in hindsight, but this structure on the king side, pawns on f7, g6, h5, is usually quite durable and protective to the king. It's basically the safest, most productive pawn structure you can get if king safety is a concern, because there's only one pawn that's weak in the chain, and that's right close to the king, and it protects the 7th rank really nicely, compared to f5, g6, h7, where there's also only one weak pawn in the chain on h7, but the 7th rank is more exposed. So yeah, had black done this, I would have been really hard-pressed to do something productive, that is. I think in the moment I probably would have played rook d1, which almost seems like one of the few waiting moves I can play, right? Because I can't move this rook without losing the b3 pawn. I could move this rook back to a6 probably, but I can't move my king. King h2 runs into bishop e5. Pushing these pawns looks weakening. Even h4 I was hesitant to play because of this stuff. Yeah, that actually loses on the spot for me. So yeah, I probably would have tried to just play some waiting move like this that keeps the b3 pawn defended. The engine points out f4, opening up queen f3. Maybe I could have found that, but it's a hard operation in the moment. That just doesn't come to mind so easily, but maybe I could have found that one. Even this is no better, though. Huh. Queen c7, rook takes d5, queen takes f4. And black has full compensation still. Super strong bishop. My king remains a little weak. Yeah. Rook f1 can be met by rook takes b3. Deflection. Huh. So I think black got a little nervous, started weakening their king, f6. And here I went for it, rook e1. I tried to channel my emote or emoji that I have on Lichess, the shark. I smelled blood in the water after f6. So why is rook e6 a better move order? Is it because black just lacks options compared to rook e1 right away, where black has rook takes b3? Let's say black goes king g7. Now this rook move, and I win. So it's a way to try to shoehorn black into that line. And they can't go bishop e5 because I just take right away. And if takes, they get mated. Oh, no, that's with rook e1. So rook e6, what if they play bishop e5? Still rook e1 with this threat. And this transposes to the game, but it doesn't allow rook b1 as a defense. So rook e1 is a mistake. It's the right idea, trying to abandon the b pawn, double the rooks, throw in queen d2, and attack black's newly weakened king. But this was the better way to start it. An essential move in the sequence, doubling the rooks, but holding on to the b pawn a little longer to prevent counterplay. And best for black is queen d7, rook b to e1, rook b7, trying to arrange a defense on the 7th rank. That's interesting, because there I can always win the queen. This is actually something I kind of hallucinated in the game, because I thought black might have rook b7 somewhere. So this could happen, but this is equal. And actually, materially, it's equal. Rook, bishop, and pawn versus queen. Okay. That's really tough for both of us. So I'm mostly happy that I came up with the right idea here. Rook e1, because I had a minute and 17. And rook takes b3 is correct, hitting my queen, queen check. And now king g7, king h7, it doesn't technically matter in terms of the eval. But the crucial thing is on the doubling move, black must play rook b1, which is a tough move to play, I will say. Black had 2.5 minutes. I had 1.5 minutes. I wasn't looking at rook b1, and I would guess that black wasn't either. Because all of the action suddenly has shifted to the king side. So this is where your eyes naturally go. And you see this blaring threat of rook e7. It's hard to think about rook b1, which defends against rook e7 because black has queen takes e7 in response to that move, and the rook is pinned. So, yeah, tough. I feel for my opponent. How would I have played against rook b1? I think I would have played something like king h2 or f4 here. King h2 looks flexible to me. Is that a blunder in some way? No. Rook takes e1, rook takes e1, h4. Try to clamp the dark squares. Now I have to play f4. This is still kind of interesting. Black now has a bishop and 2 pawns against the rook, but their king remains open. I mean, I think even here I'd still have some chances because black's really got to watch something like queen e2, queen e8 with rook e7. So that's not so simple. So I really feel like that f6 move on a practical level was a move black would like to have back. Just weaken the king in every case. Keeping that pawn on f7 and just chilling with the king was the way to play. So f6, rook e1. Yep. And now black pretty quickly played bishop e5. Now originally I was going to play f4 here from a distance, but actually bishop c3 is an option. Oh, that's a cool distinction because on rook e7, if black had played bishop c3 right away, I think I might have mentioned this in the game. I have rook e7 check supported by the rook, but the important thing is after black moves the king, well, maybe this isn't so important. Yeah, I was going to say queen h6 and play for checkmate, but we can probably actually take on b7 too. Yeah, because I was thinking this might present some problem with rook takes b3, bishop takes e1, but there's actually rook e8 mate. Got it. So bishop c3 fails when the queen has access here. So why does f4 bishop c3 fail? Yeah, it's just I don't have... well, wait. Why does it fail? Because oh, black can go to h6 with their king. Rook e7. They have king h6. It works the same if king b7, because I have rook takes b7, but they can actually go here now. And then there's no immediate mate that black is trying to dodge. So if rook takes b7, takes on d2 works. And we get this big liquidation, and black can at least draw this ending. And I probably have to be careful to some degree. Wow. And what if queen takes c... Oh, this is funny. If queen takes c3 here, black has queen takes e7. And the deflections go both ways. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm glad I didn't go for f4. The f4 is a natural move to try to break the coordination. Because originally I didn't see rook takes e5 when I decided to go for it like this. I was thinking f4. But then it occurred to me that this whole thing with the queen coming to g5, whether black's king is on g7 or h7, I don't think it matters. This wins because if black's queen comes over to one of these squares, rook e7, we get the pin. And again, it's so crucial that my king always has h2. Now, I thought black might play a position like this out and just try to force me to win. Something like this. But it should win. I think I can separate black from... So rook d8 runs into queen e7. I can separate black from all but one of their pawns. Maybe not even then. Maybe I throw in queen d6. Yeah, probably I can just do this and collect their pawns because their king is so weak. Again, you can see the problem they face without a pawn on f7. So, okay, maybe resignation was not premature for black, but I was expecting them to play down to queen versus rook and make me prove the win. But yep, bishop e5, that did it, allowing the take and queen g5. And I was able to pounce just in time. Queen takes g6 with rook e8 is just too huge of a threat. Rook b1, king h2 does nothing for black. So this is lights out. They can't defend their king all of a sudden. Okay, wow, what a deep game. And I say that mainly for myself, the disconnect from what I was feeling in the game, in the middle game specifically, versus what the computer was actually insisting upon as the truth in the position. That black is the one who is substantially better throughout all this. And even the way in which I won the exchange wasn't that great. Black is still quite a bit better, -1, -2. So a good game to keep me humble and teach me something, really check my understanding. And I do think a lot of this stems from the opening. And you're seeing this more and more these days where openings are connected to middle games and middle game understanding with engines and just how deep and how strong they are. You can glean quite a bit in analyzing with a good engine and going relatively deep in the opening about how a middle game should be played. And I would bet dollars to donuts that in this middle game, this is a theme where black just enjoys great activity despite the nominally weak pawn on d5. And despite white having some sort of blockade, it's just much easier to put pressure on white's position. And white always suffers from some defects with the weak king, that f3 move, weak pawn on c5, possibly an e-file, bishop being targeted. But to be this far off in my evaluation that doesn't happen too often, guys. So I think this is a really cool finale, and I'm of course happy to win. But wow, what a disconnect from my evaluation compared to the objective evaluation. So thanks again to my opponent, Bulgakov. Very tough, good preparation, great preparation. I hope you guys enjoyed this league. I'm either going to wrap it up here. I actually don't know what the final standings are, though, at the time that I'm playing this game, because board 1 is being played tomorrow, Sunday, which is the last day that games can be played in the week for the game. So you might see a little wrap up after this, tagged on to the end of this video where I go through the standings. We'll have to see. But regardless, thanks to Bulgakov and thanks to all you for following my efforts in this Lone Wolf League. And I end on 9 points out of 11. And I will either tie for first or maybe outright win first place. So we'll see what happens in that board 1 game. So thanks again for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Till next time, I won't be joining Lone Wolf League in the short term. The next season, I'm going to take at least 1 season's break. But I have a feeling this won't be the last time that you see me in the Lone Wolf League. So stay tuned. All right. Thanks again, guys. Let me know your thoughts on this game. We'll see you later. All right, I'm back. So I'm recording this 2 days after my game. Sorry for the bit of delay in posting this video, but I wanted to wait until the standings were finalized and that game between M. de Verdier and Antazi 8 had been played. That was played on Sunday, the actual last day of the league, I think. And my game against Bulgakov 1967 was played on Saturday. So the result of that game was a victory for M. de Verdier. Yes, the higher rated player came through and got the victory. And that means that I am the sole player who finished on 9 out of 11, the highest score in the league. So I won season 37 of the Lone Wolf League on Lichess. And sorry, this view here is a little confusing. This is actually the wall chart, which is different than the standings. I was waiting to post this video until the standings were finalized, but I was told in the league just now that there's typically a delay after a season concludes where they run a basic fair play check and they just want to make sure everyone's playing clean and fairly, and then they post the final standings. But for the purposes of getting this video out, not making you guys wait longer than you have, yes, I think once the standings are finalized, it'll show that I am the only player on 9 out of 11, clear first place in the league. So it came down to the wire. That game between M. de Verdier versus Antazi, super crucial. Had Antazi won, I think Antazi would have actually beat me on tiebreaks, which is something I didn't mention in the introductory video to this last round game. But it could have came down to tiebreaks, just a pure series of mathematical formulas that they have to determine who would be the winner. So I think I would have lost to Antazi on tiebreaks. He had a great season. So congrats to everyone who played in this league, but especially to Pirate of the Frisians as well for finishing on 8.5 points. And then you can see the score here, by the way. Again, this view's a little bit confusing because it's not in order of points. And then also SidFan DX. Let's see if I can find SidFan, because SidFan DX also finished on 8.5, won his final round game. So those two players, I guess depending upon the tie breaks, will finish second and third, respectively, in the league. So that's Lone Wolf League Season 37, my debut in the league. There were how many players total? If we go all the way down here, 278 players. Some people played only a game or two. Some people played all 11 games, but huge league. And just happy with the result. I had that bump in the road pretty early on where I lost to happy mode. So that set me back. I felt like I didn't have much margin for error after that. I did, in fact, draw 2 games, but it was enough to win. And I benefited from a favorable pairing, I think, in the final round. Not because Bulgakov 1967 isn't a good player, mainly because I got white a second time in a row. So that's just the way the pairings go down sometimes. So with this season in the books, what are my plans for future seasons? Well, I'm definitely going to take next season off, so I won't be playing in Lone Wolf season number 38, but I might have my eye on season 39. It's dependent on what I've got going on, some of my work obligations, what I'm doing with Chessiverse. I do have my Scandinavian course coming out soon, and that will definitely be out before season 37 takes off. No doubt about that. I really enjoyed this league. I love the format. It's pretty long. So if you are getting into it, and especially committing for the entirety of the league, just be ready. I mean, you kind of know what you're getting into, but it's a nice pace too. The 1 game per week, the preparation aspect. You can take the preparation as seriously or as casually if you want. I know there's players in this league who prepared hours for games, and surely some players who more or less just decided to show up and play. So you can do whatever you want depending upon your chess goals and how seriously you want to take the practice that this league affords. So I do have my eye on playing a future season, maybe season 39. There's another league as well. There's the 45+45 league. I probably won't play that anytime soon. That's a team league, a longer time control. I'm sure that's a lot of fun, but I personally don't have any plans to play that. But I definitely want to stay involved in some capacity, even if I don't end up playing season 39. I've been graciously asked by one of the organizers of the Lone Wolf League if I might do a simul for some of the league participants, I think for the 45+45 league. So it'd be great to do something like that and continue to be involved in the league. So before I conclude, huge shout out to the mods of the league and everyone else who played, all of you guys who followed me. There was a ton of hours recorded in this season, and I do know there are some of you who watched every single hour of these videos. So truly, truly appreciate it. And a final plug for these leagues. Please do consider joining. It's completely free. I have no incentive other than to just try to promote an amazing free league run by volunteers that will help you get better at chess. So do consider doing it, joining the league, that is. And I do think it's the best practice you can get online in a competitive format. So it's really, really well done. One of the mods actually asked if I had feedback of any sort for the league afterwards, and I really couldn't think of much in the way of improvements. I think the system that they use with the Slack channel and the pairings, everything is pretty much bang, bang, bang on time. You get the gist of this after a week or two. And the only improvements I actually have is maybe for a potentially new league under the Lone Wolf and 45+45 organizational structure that I have been turning around in my head. If people are interested, maybe a dual commentary league is what I'm thinking. My game with When Rooks Fly from a few rounds ago got me thinking that might be something cool. So I haven't fleshed that out, but if anyone out there watching this who might be interested in a dual commentary league where you're commentating your games and playing against other players who are also commentating, I think that would be a pretty cool format. So hypothetical. but might be neat. All right, I'm going to sign off now. This was a blast. Thanks again, you guys. And maybe I'll see you in Lone Wolf League number 39. Don't hold me to that, but we'll see what we can do. All right, guys, take care and best wishes for your chess improvement.